Oh, there we go.
Okay, it says this Hangout Air is live. Is that correct? Is that what it should say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it shows live.
Yep,
Okay.
we're live.
Yay, okay. Does someone want to offer a word of prayer?
Sure.
Please?
Let Russell
Pretty
go.
please?
Let Russell go.
Yeah, Russell.
Our dear Father in heaven, we're very grateful this evening that we can be together as a group, and we're grateful for the camaraderie that we have, and we pray that the Spirit be with us throughout our meeting and that we can grow from one another. We pray that those that aren't with us, they can join us tonight if they're able to, and we pray that they can have a pleasant evening, and we say this in Jesus Christ tonight.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Okay, so did anyone else find this case study kind of depressing?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know about depressing, but
I was
disgusting.
I was honestly like super
There's
sad.
Susan.
Oh. Well, let her in.
Okay.
That's weird. Is she like, do we have to accept the call?
I don't know. Hi,
I sent out the
Susan.
link.
Yeah.
So we're on a link through the, your email. Have you looked at your BYUI account? Okay. She's saying that it won't work.
Well, what's her email and I'll invite her personally. Does anybody have it on hand?
Her email is Susan, CISCO
CISCO.
at Gmail.
Thank you. Okay, will you tell Susan I just sent her an invite?
Okay, they just sent you an invite
Through her Gmail. Or
to your Gmail.
Yes.
Do you see it? Oh, okay. She's logging in.
Oh my gosh, Angela, I just looked at your son's address. I was in Houston a couple weeks ago for work, so that's really funny.
oh, cool.
That's really awesome.
Astros
Okay,
are
I'll just
playing
wait.
tonight.
I know. I got invited to watch the game, and I'm here with you guys instead.
Similar story.
I guess we'll wait.
Which game?
I guess Susan can just jump in when she gets it.
Yeah,
gets
just
here.
have her jump in.
Okay, so I agree with all of you that I was totally disgusted at the whole case study, and it made me really sad. And there was a video that was posted. As we all know, the Columbia, they basically they had a huge piece of foam that it looks like could have been prevented, that should have had something done about it, and in turn they did absolutely nothing about it. And I believe it was 7 people died. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to talk about what they did wrong today and what we think they could have done to fix it. So let's talk. So those are just some basic facts about the case. What did you guys, or what was one of the issues that you guys saw? And let's talk about what we think. Let's talk about the issue, and then B, let's talk about what they could have done to resolve it.
I think their biggest issue is communication. Well, no, that wouldn't be their biggest, but communication is a big one.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Their
bureaucracy.
lack of communication. Yeah.
What examples did you guys see of like a lack of communication? Because I agree.
The weird thing that I saw is it's like they were talking, like the information was being sent out, but nobody was listening to it. So I think that's where the communication breakdown happened, because Roche, or whatever you pronounce his name, was telling everybody, was trying really hard to reach out, but nobody would listen to it or take it seriously. People are putting their own agendas above the other people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're talking about the engineer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, nobody is listening to the people that are down there even Boeing. They wouldn't listen to the Boeing people or Tricol people too either.
I thought it was really crazy, the email that not the email, but just how he said that he didn't feel comfortable telling anybody except his peers. like that he didn't feel like he should tell anybody else above him how serious it was.
It sounded like they were not encouraged to.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's kind of weird.
And almost, I mean, I can understand why he'd be almost afraid to. I mean, you saw how people reacted when he did speak up, like that argument that he had in the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
That dude just kind of blew up on him.
Well, yeah, and that to me would be scary just for the fact of like, I know that, I mean, in NASA, I'm sure that's one of the only jobs that you can get specifically in aeronautical things. And if somebody kind of screwed you over there, I don't think that would be good for your career.
Yeah.
I think also a problem that I saw was a lot of stuff was outsourced to different people in the beginning, like structural things. So maybe like that also contributed to getting like faulty supplies.
I agree. And that was actually something, did anybody see that was a lead to communication breakdown as well?
I mean, I know they had like really undefined protocols that they needed to follow in order to get any info out there, and I thought that was a huge problem. And then like the interesting thing was, it's like they picked and chose which protocols they wanted to do, because for instance, they had that explosion in the past that was, there was that big investigation on where they needed to make sure that they fixed anything wrong that they see could be a problem with the mission. And they saw that the foam could be an issue, and they said that they needed to get it fixed, but instead of making it something to fix, they downclassed it so that they could just keep on dealing with the hazard, which I thought was pathetic, to be quite frank. Like, they were supposed to do that, but instead they were just like, oh, let's just give it a different title so that we don't have to deal with it at this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't want it to slow them down or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that's really bad is they made everything in-house, so that it's been happening for years and years and nothing's happened, so we don't have to deal with it. Is that same issue.
The whole Russian roulette thing, which is the problem in the first place.
Yeah, so go ahead. Sorry, I thought someone was going to say something.
I was trying to call again.
Oh, Susan is?
I got Susan calling. And has anybody heard from Michelle either? Sorry,
Maybe they're just taking the night off and going to watch later.
Could be.
Maybe they're watching the World Series. Can't blame them.
Probably. I was wondering, I was like, why is it that everyone is getting a chance to talk and no one's saying, oh, no, your turn?
We're so polite.
I know, also polite. So if I'm hearing everybody right, like the three of the main issues were communication and their protocols that they were or were not having in place, which it sounded like it was more of a lack thereof. And then third, using in-house or third party, and that using a breakdown in maybe materials or in protocol in general. Did I miss anything there that are like big ones?
Oh, you know what I thought was really bad too, and it goes with the communication, is the head lady. Let me look and see her name. But she like dismissed it, even though they were talking, in their in the MMT group, the mission management team. They were supposed to meet daily when the mission was out there, and they only met 5 times. But even when she did meet, she would say things like, well, even if there's something wrong, there's not much we can do about it.
So it's like, so even if, which is stupid, because it's like them saying, well, even if they are going to die, there's nothing we can do about it, which is entirely false. If they knew.
And this lady is at the top of the Space Shuttle Program office. She's like the manager up there. Like, she's in the 4th box down. I mean, she's like one of the top people.
Made it.
Hey.
Yeah, Angela.
Does that link work for you,
Susan? You made it, Susan.
Yes, thank you. I've been knocking and you guys weren't answering.
Oh, really?
I've called like 12 times and it goes do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do, and then it says you guys are all unavailable.
Sorry, Susan.
That's okay. We're cool now.
We're glad you're here. We're just talking about as a slight recap about some of the main issues of the program, and the thing that Angela was just talking about was specifically about how the lady over the head of the whole program was just kind of dismissing it as like, well, it's not even that big of a deal. Even if we could do, we can't do anything about it, so it doesn't matter. Is that correct?
This
Angela?
is what it says on page 8, and her name's Linda Ham.
Right.
She reminded everyone that foam losses had occurred often on previous flights and commented that foam was, quote, not really a factor during the flight because there's not much we can do about it. So they weren't even trying to fix the foam problem.
They're like, oh yeah, that happens every time. So it's just whatever.
And then later she said something though about fixing the, like making a repair and stuff, or I don't know. They were talking about, you know, telling the people on the ship or something, and she's like, well, it's not really an issue. There's nothing we can do about that anyway. You know.
Well, what's even worse is that, like, when they were coming up with all these ways to even verify that there's a problem, and they wouldn't even let them do it. Like, they tried to get permission to do a spacewalk just to go out there and check things out, and they declined that. It's like, why the heck would you decline the possibility of spacewalk if there's even the slightest possibility that something could go wrong? My heart was broken.
Blew my mind. Go ahead, Russell.
Oh, I was going to say, this whole thing just broke my little heart because I always thought NASA was like the bee's knees. And then I found out all the dirty secrets, and I was very disillusioned.
So I'm not the only one who cried at the end of this story.
I cried on the inside because I may or may not have read it at my desk at work. So.
Can I tell you guys something? I was raised in Florida. My father was stationed at Patrick Air Force Base. He worked at Cape Canaveral. As a kid, and I'm aging myself now, we sat on the roof of our house and watched the I don't know how many launches, one after the other after the other. So these things are so near and dear to my heart. And not the space shuttle, but earlier missions, including the one to the moon. And when I read all of this and found, you know, there were 8 missed opportunities where they could have saved the lives of these 7 people, and they did nothing about it.
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
Yeah.
Really sick.
It seemed like that
absolutely-
they were.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Sure. It seemed like that they were just so focused on making profit and staying on schedule that, like, oh,
Yes.
you know, they're not that important. Like, what in the world are they thinking?
Which is stupid because the
frustrating.
disaster put them even more behind schedule. And so it's
Exactly.
like, by trying to do it their way, it made things worse than if they were their own agenda.
And you know, another thing is when she like canceled the pictures that the
Yes.
engineer had requested from the military. I mean, why would you not want to get more information? I think they just didn't. I think they just didn't want to admit that there was a real problem.
Yeah.
So like, if we don't allow people to know about it, then we'll be okay, or something.
Yeah, which it actually points out, and I think one of the huge things we're hearing here is the downplaying. Something they talk about in the agenda is the downplaying of ambiguous threats. What do you guys think are the reasonings behind that? I mean, I've heard you guys mention time. I've heard you mention money. Do you think there are any other factors at play for why they downplayed something that was such a threat?
I think they're worried about their image or something. But to me, if you have a problem and you go out and you find the solution, or you find that there is a problem and you find a solution and you know, take care of it, to me, that's going to make your image look better with the public than having stuff like this happen.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination.
Don't you think it would make you have more confidence in them that they're actually working and doing something?
I would rather err on the side of caution than just like, oh, it's fine, no biggie.
I think that nobody in the upper level positions wanted to walk out on the plank for fear that they would be wrong. I don't know if it was in the article that we were given, but I did a whole lot of research, and one of the articles I read, one of the directors said, I'm not going to be Chicken Little on this.
Oh yeah, it's in this one.
Is that, is that in that? And I thought, oh my goodness, nobody wants to take responsibility.
Or one of them said, what is it? Once you think of surrendering, that is the path you go down. Like,
Yes.
what? That's not. How's that surrendering? I don't get that. That's just a weird attitude.
No, I don't think that was a negative. I think what he was telling them was, once we have the mindset that we're not going to be successful, then you're going to work towards that goal, and that wasn't a good thing.
Yeah, I think it was almost the sense that they were willing to compromise their ethics of how they felt about the process, of their integrity, of how they felt about their creation, and all those things that made a huge difference for them, and just led them to a spiral effect of that.
I think they're also being.
Kind of makes me wonder how many other things have gone this way.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. Like, I mean, I think pride was a big issue, but I also think maybe they were being a little bit lazy too, because if they found out there was a problem, and like they would have to try to fix it, even if whether or not it was like a mission critical thing or not. And so they didn't want to know that there was a problem, because then they would be obligated to fix it. Like, I mean, that's probably why they didn't want to do the spacewalk and other things, because they just wanted to avoid seeing a problem that they would have to fix.
I agree.
Yeah.
If they acknowledged it, then they were going to have to do something about it. And like they said, they're like, well, even if there is something, even if we knew there was something wrong, there's nothing we can do about it. They just accepted defeat, which was disgusting to me, because we talked about the Tiger team or something like that had been formed before in other instances that they had used to save people's lives. And they had done the impossible virtually. And then they ended up just throwing away those people's lives.
Yeah, they didn't even use that, the Tiger team.
No.
How could you not use that team? That's such a cool acronym. I mean, seriously.
Right.
Oh, that's too funny. So what do you guys think? So this is kind of a question I thought was interesting, is when do you think the problems with Columbia really began?
I think it happened back in the early 1990s when they started doing the exact same thing over again. When they started ignoring, like as the investigator of the previous case said, playing Russian roulette with their safety protocols. Like, they know that something's wrong, and though it hasn't caused any major issues yet, they're saying, oh, well, it hasn't happened this time. Well, obviously we're going to be fine next time too. And then they just continue doing that. And so I think that culture that they started way back when is whenever it all began.
Yeah, and that was back in the 70s that a lot of that started happening.
When I was sitting on the roof in Florida.
There you go.
What was I doing in the 70s?
I wasn't
you weren't even born. Be quiet.
Youngsters wouldn't know.
No, I completely agree. I mean, does anybody have any different thoughts about that? Maybe it would have occurred during a different time. And I apologize that you can't see me. My phone kicked me. Apparently, the group Google Hangout kicked me out, so my computer doesn't work on it.
You look good in blue.
I was going to say, you're very symmetrical. It's good. It's cool.
I miss the sparkles though.
Yeah, and the pink hair.
Keep pulsating. You're pulsating. That looks good when you see your heart beating.
I know, but then you can't see my pink hair or my sparkles or anything. Like, I'm really mad for you guys.
I was going to say, Alex, you feel a little blue?
I do feel a little blue now that you can't see all my coolness. I guess that you can see the coolness of the blue about me, which is worse.
That's right.
Okay, so why? So, and we kind of already talked about this, but why did the debris strike become an acceptable risk? Like, why do you think they never did anything about it? Like, I mean, the debris happened so many times, and yeah, it didn't end up in anything. But why do you think no one looked into it further?
Well, I think because they had so many launches without it. I mean, just think about it. If you had an open yard and you had a little kid and he never went out to the road, and so you just became you became more lax with it, and just let it go and let it go. And then one day he goes out there. You know, I mean, it's the same kind of thing. Yep. I think they just become comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also, it was first classified as an in-flight anomaly, which their protocols said they had to fix before the next flight in order for them to have be able to even take off. So
that's why they downgraded the seriousness of it.
yeah, because they didn't find a solution, so they're like, well, we can't fix the problem, let's downgrade the seriousness of it and keep on going on like we have been.
And then they just forgot to go back and fix it or try to figure it out.
No,
Or just didn't even want to.
I think they just chose not to, because I remember in the case study they talked about the kind of budget they were on too, that they were short on budget and they were charging people a third of the cost of the actual cost to even run the flight.
Right. Well, they also were in a tremendous rush. You know, they were working those crews 24 hours a day to get those 80 scientific experiments done. So there wasn't a lot of time to fool around with, you know, the possibility of the whole thing blowing up.
Well, and also I think another thing is with their budget is they were trying to do launches. What did they want? Like something like 70 launches a year or something just really ridiculously
50,
outrageous, if you ask me.
It was a lot.
I mean, just, was it 60?
50.
50.
Okay, 50. But still, in 1 year, that's kind of ridiculous. That's like one a week. I mean, and to just get, it just doesn't seem to me a feasible thing to do.
Well, we found out it wasn't.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Did anyone else?
Well, and because of that, they didn't keep working on their problems. They just let them go. You know, I think that's why, because they're just trying to rush and become, instead of an event thing, like a project, they've tried to become like this organization that's doing stuff all the time, you know,
I thought it was
instead of.
What were you saying, Alex?
I thought it was so funny to me that in the case study they said that it was so easy to fly, but they had a name for it and I can't remember what it was, but that it was in the hangar being fixed more than any spaceship before it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Columbia,
Yeah.
So that just blew my mind. I was like, if that doesn't tell you that there's something wrong with it, I don't know what would.
Well, yeah, they're saying it had rocky takeoffs, but like once they got it off the ground, it was beautiful or whatever.
So
the Hangar Queen.
Yes.
The Hangar Queen, that's what it was.
I just happened to look down and I was on that page, so.
Way to go, Angela. So here's an interesting question. What do you believe, where did it go? How would you characterize, which we've talked about this a little bit, of the culture, how would you characterize the culture of NASA? And let's start with strengths, which I know may be a difficult thing to talk about, but let's talk about strengths first. Let's at least give them one.
I can't think of any.
Well, they did have
had some good engineers.
They had, I was just going to say the engineers, they had good guys in there working on things. They just didn't listen to them.
But you know what?
But,
It
they didn't
started
support.
before the shuttle ever went up. You know, we were talking about how long prior was there an issue. Even just the days before, the weather forecast was off, and they decided to go ahead anyway.
Yeah.
So they had
86.
safety built in, but they didn't pay attention to it.
So
So I guess that's not a positive, is it? Let me think of a positive.
Well, the positive is they have safety built in. The downside is they didn't listen to it.
They didn't follow the safety.
Did anybody else notice that like there was trust maybe amongst small groups, amongst like engineers and amongst other people, but there was no trust, or at least anything to take out of the trust accounts as a whole?
I agree. It seems like people didn't trust those that reported to them. They trusted each other and their teams, but it didn't seem like they trusted in a vertical way as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about the weaknesses of specifically the culture at NASA, not necessarily what they did wrong, but like the culture of how they handled things, I guess.
Well, there was the one statement that prove it's unsafe.
Yes.
Their philosophy that you have to prove it's unsafe. That just really, that's scary.
What I found really irritating is that instead of communicating to the crew, they just kind of sent them a little email saying, it's just, we want you to know about it, but it's really nothing.
It's nothing.
They should have been the first ones to know, hey, there might be a problem. You might want to go take a look and see what's going on. Their lives are at stake, and they're like, oh, just sweep it under the rug. I'm like, what?
I agree. That made me think of the idea that they're probably not they are collaborative when it comes to new technologies and new things that they want to come out with and how quick they want to do things, but they're not collaborative as a general whole.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Come on, I know you guys have more weaknesses than that. What else was wrong with NASA?
Well, they were complacent.
Yes.
They were complacent. I mean, they beat the Russians to the moon, and I think once that happened, all of the rest of this was just fluff. Mm-hmm. And I think the enthusiasm was gone to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was talking to my brother about this because we go on a hike once a week. It's fun. But anyway, and when I told him about the guy blowing up in the hallway at the engineer, saying, if nothing, even if there's a problem, we couldn't do a dang thing and all that. And I was, and he just immediately said, it sounds like the doctor and the nurse syndrome, like how the doctors wouldn't listen to the nurse, trying to tell them what's going on so they don't amputate the wrong leg kind of thing. Like the people in the upper, no, it's like these are true stories, but like,
no, it does happen.
The people in the upper management, they think that they have almost like a God complex. They're like, we are NASA, we are rocket scientists,
Yeah.
They won't listen to the people lower than them, especially if it doesn't fit with their agenda. And so like the bureaucracy, just people thinking that they're above one another and like thinking that way is, I think, caused a lot of issue.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Well, have you guys seen that movie, Hidden Figures?
Yeah,
Yes.
That was a great movie. I loved it.
What movie?
Hidden Figures.
It's called Hidden Figures. It's about the Black woman that participated in NASA.
Oh, yeah. I heard about it. I didn't see it.
Okay, what were you going to say about it, Annie?
Well, just, that's a true story. Just depending on the time frame it was at. But it just shows that even, they just didn't take people's opinions into account because there was always somebody higher in a higher position that knows more. And that's kind of how, it seems like that's how they've always been, even from the start.
Now that you say
it's
that.
like,
Go ahead, Angela.
well, I was just going to say, it's just like almost opposite of what we've been learning, this semester so far about listening and how leaders can learn from the other people and vice versa, and just having that open mind to things. It's like they don't have that culture in there at all.
Mm-hmm. It kind of makes me think of the butt kissing mentality, if I'm allowed to say that.
I'm offended.
It's like you play the corporate game of like who's gonna.
Hey, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
That you play that corporate game of just like who's friends with who and who knows who and who's sucking up to who and who's doing the best job, and that it's not about who's really doing the best job. It's about who looks the best to the boss. Otherwise, even if you're doing a good job, like in that movie Hidden Figures, that woman was doing an amazing job, but nobody saw her even like relatively until it was like a man's life on the line and she was the only one that knew the answer to the problem. Michelle, we were just talking about the weaknesses of the culture of NASA altogether. Okay. Kind of them being comfortably numb a little bit, as the song say. That was what the whole time I read this was the idea of comfortably numb the whole time because they just thought they were better than everyone else. So are there any other weaknesses that you guys can think of that you guys would like to address?
I think one thing was that there really wasn't a trust factor in there, to the point where there was so much confidentiality in certain compartments and stuff that people couldn't get the information necessary to do their job because it was confidential,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there was no communication between groups. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, one group was not allowed to talk to another group and give them what information they knew. And so they were never able to compile everything and figure out. make an analysis, a real analysis.
I think one of the biggest weaknesses was, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go.
You may have already said it, but I think one of the biggest weaknesses is, her just canceling that request just because none of her people, she didn't bother. She knew if someone was concerned about safety, but she was like, well, it wasn't my people, so it must not be important.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Yep. It's interesting that you bring up the point about they're not my people, it's not my problem. Instead of her just canceling it, she made a point to say, this isn't my problem because this isn't my department or my whatever, even though it was vitally important. But Susan, what were you going to say? Sorry.
Oh my goodness. It'll come back in a second. Let me just see my notes. Oh, I know. The whole idea that their own procedures and policies stated that they were to have a meeting every day while the space shuttle was in flight. The space shuttle was in orbit 16 days. They had 5 of these meetings, which were supposed to be required every day. Yeah. So, from the beginning, I really think complacency was an incredible issue with these people. They've done it so many times before. They just assumed it was going to go with the flow and everything was going to be fine.
And that lady, Linda Ham, she was in charge of that group.
Yeah.
That's what's really bad.
If there was any accountability within the group of any of the people that worked there, like any consequences that they were going to have to live up to because the foam fell before they knew the people were going to die or before the people died?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't notice that.
I didn't. Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's what I noticed, is that there wasn't any. There was no accountability to anyone anywhere to report back to one person that was in charge of making sure that this got looked into. Yeah. Which to me is a huge thing. I mean, we talk about trust and accountability and how one of the ways that to build trust is to be accountable and to not just be accountable, but to help hold other people accountable in a positive manner. And I feel like, I don't know what everyone else thinks, that wasn't done at all.
Yeah.
So.
Amen.
Okay, so here's a question. So who's accountable? And why?
Well, ultimately, it comes to the head of NASA. I mean, that's where the blame lies. Of course, that'll never happen.
No. Do you think other heads would have rolled outside of the head of NASA, or who do you think? I don't know whose heads rolled as a result of this. Maybe no one's did, but
I don't think anything really happened. There was
in
a
all my
blame
research, I couldn't
around.
find anything.
Yeah, I didn't see anything either. I think that in and of itself is kind of horrible.
Well, I think when I don't know if I read an article and it said that they actually could have rescued those guys out there.
Yes.
There was enough time that they could have stayed longer and they could have launched another spaceship or rocket out
Atlantis.
there. Yes.
Yeah. Atlantis could have been launched earlier.
Yes. And so they could have either gotten the astronauts off or they could have done a repair. So I think if anyone's head should have rolled, it would have been that Linda Ham and the people on that MTT, the mission group that was supposed to meet daily that didn't. I think all of them should be kind of in trouble.
I agree.
I wonder where they are now.
I secretly, sounds kind of horrible, but I secretly hope that it changed their careers drastically in a not positive way.
Yeah. It was just really irresponsible. The whole thing was just irresponsible.
Yep.
Yeah, it was.
I 100% agree. So I thought it might be a good idea to talk about maybe what were some things that they could have done or things that you move forward in order to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. I know we're talking in past tense and whatnot, but that they should have enacted at that time.
Well, I think one thing they should have done, they're so strict on these protocols and following them. I think they should have had an oversight committee specifically for any safety-related concerns.
Yes.
That way they could
Even if
expedite those and make sure. Not to add more political and red tape, but like an oversight committee for safety that would cut through every other red tape. It takes priority. If it's labeled a safety concern, it goes direct to here, and they make sure that there is no safety issue or can resolve it if it is.
Well, didn't they kind of have that in some way? I mean, they had this mission management team that was supposed to meet every day. And then if there was issues, they were supposed to create that tiger team.
But
thing.
they
I mean, that is,
But they
they
weren't
failed to do
meeting,
that.
for one thing.
And if there is a problem, they need to make sure they have good photos so that they can see. I mean, to me, even if Ham hadn't ordered, any of her people hadn't ordered those photos, it would seem to me that that would be something she would want to make sure that everything was okay. I mean,
I think she was more
really
concerned
failed.
with the turnaround time than the safety because the foam had never caused problems before, kind of like the Challenger's O-rings issue. The same problem. It was a repeat of the same previous problem. They got complacent, no major problems, so they ignored the warnings and the concerns because there hadn't been a problem before.
Goes back to kind of what we talked about before, that they were comfortable and that, you know, they didn't have accountability and they didn't have anybody that, you know, was going to be responsible for it in the end, which to me is just, I don't know, this whole thing was just very devastating to me. Which
It was
just,
to me too.
It was just so sad to me that just, I don't know. And just
Well, and you know, the ultimate sadness was that the folks at the Johnson Space Center didn't even know about it until news people in Arizona had reported it. And then they learned that the Challenger had exploded. You know, they were 16 minutes from landing in Florida. 16 minutes and they exploded. That just is so incredible to me.
Yeah.
I agree. What do you think about maybe like, I thought in here it mentioned something about team unity. Do you think that there's anything to create more unity within their culture of their teams and within the culture of NASA to make any difference?
I think a softball team would have been good. Just kidding, I'm kidding.
Well, I think just having some kind of a listening between layers of bureaucracy. They just need to have some kind of a listening that's open and available to everyone. I think that would create some unity, don't you think? Like,
yes.
By listening, do you mean like a separate team of people that was kind of their job to like take in everyone's pieces of information, or they?
No, I mean more like just the engineers can go to the guy above them and say something that they're seeing and feeling, and that those people listening and really following through, and them being able to go to the next group and just having openness. That would put a lot of trust in there.
I agree.
You know, taking the thing serious.
So how do you think we go about creating it? Because I agree completely. I think that one thing alone could have made a huge difference in whether or not people lived or died.
Well, the only thing that could change that is humility with the people above. And so how are you going to get that to happen? You either have got to get new people, or these people have got to have some kind of change upon themselves.
You need an arbitrator or an ombudsman office, some middleman that isn't swayed by either, but can listen to, you know, both sides and move things forward.
Maybe.
And I think this might be a good time to do some sort of like in-house like surveys and stuff like that, maybe quarterly or something like that, where you would assess your managers, and then, you know, then if they have bad assessments, then they can evaluate whether or not they can be in that position, kind of thing. That way, there is a sense of accountability to the people below them, and they make more inclined before they internalize that change, at least.
That's a good idea, Russell.
I agree.
That's a good idea.
I think that's a great idea. And I completely agree. I think that if maybe they would have just taken more time, and if in the future they took more time to create a collaborative environment that would have made a huge difference for them. So interesting enough, do you guys remember when was it last week that we talked about the recruiting of a rock star? We were recruiting star talent.
I think it was 2 weeks.
2 weeks ago.
I saw some interesting parallels, kind of interesting about like when you said, Angela, about the idea of, do you go out and get new people, or do you go from within and fix what you have? So do you think that maybe there would have been some changes that they needed to have within their organization in order to complete that type of a change within their organization? Or do you think this is fixable?
Well, I think, I think anything is fixable if you have the right people, if you have people that are in the right mindset. So, I mean, you might be able to do some fixing with it, but I think there would have to be some harsh consequences to some of the people in order to get them to be fixable. So, I mean, I don't know if any of these people had consequences, but if they had some harsh consequences, maybe there could be some changes. Because a lot of times people won't change unless there's something that's compelling them greatly to change.
With them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I had a.
So you.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Russell.
Oh, it's kind of going on. You said I had a business teacher that I would always say, if you can't change the people, then you got to change the people. So.
Then you got to change what?
The people. So like, you can't change the people, like make them change. You got to change the people, like switch them out. So.
In other words, the wrong people are on the bus.
Yes.
Exactly. Yep. And maybe they can get a new seat, but maybe you might just need to get some new guy on the bus in their place.
Yeah.
And in a lot of situations that would probably work, but in something like this, you certainly can't do it while the space shuttle is orbiting. I mean, that should have been done long before.
This is after that.
Yeah.
Or before.
Or before.
Yeah.
Preferably before, but yeah.
So this.
I don't know. I wonder, like that engineer, if he, I feel like if you really had a strong feeling, and I think he's the one that saw the foam, how big it was, and it made him gasp, like he knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
To me, I mean, if that was me, I'm just thinking I would keep going and telling people until someone listened to me. I would find some way for someone to listen to me. Clear up until they were coming back in. I kind of, maybe he has a little bit of fault because he just told his peers. And, I understand the bureaucracy and I understand maybe you'll get fired. But you know what? To me, if you feel strongly that something is wrong, you've got to make that risk. You got to take it. To make something right. I don't know.
I agree to a point. I think he really did try hard, though, because even when the guy went up in front of me and then told everybody, the guy who was like the head of the mission control or whatever, he still emailed him later and told him, I don't think he had expressed how dire the situation really is. And, he did go on, he talked to people higher up. I wonder if he just felt, defeated, he just didn't know where else to turn because they were blocking everything. But it's not about him. We're not here to discuss the ethics of the engineer, but
he ever wonders if he was ever empowered to do so. Like if he was ever told, hey, if there is an issue, this is who you need to come talk to, and I'm giving you the authority to come and tell me that. Sometimes I think that in our own human nature, we become fearful of, what would happen to us if we do become the whistleblower.
I think that would be a good thing that they could fix, is they could create that kind of culture where, someone up high says, if things aren't moving and you see something really bad, you need to come and let me know. I think that would be a good fix for this program.
Yeah.
I agree. So all of these things included, have you guys ever had experiences with anything of these sorts where maybe you didn't feel like you could talk to a colleague or a manager about something and it led to something bad, or maybe a good experience and where you did have a collaborative environment where you could talk about things and that led to a positive impact? you?
Probably all had them. We just can't think of them right now.
Can
Well,
you
also,
say that one more time? I didn't catch all of it.
oh no, you're good. I was just saying that has anybody had an experience in their work environment or with maybe even in school or in a family environment or something where you felt like you could go talk to the person above you or your manager or boss and that that led to a positive thing, or when maybe you didn't feel like you could go and be a whistleblower and that led to something negative happening?
I worked in a office where the manager hired a lot of people that she knew outside of work, and so it was just kind of an awkward moment because I didn't know her outside of work, and so one guy in particular that she hired used to smoke at his desk inside the office. He had one of those e-cigs.
Oh yeah.
That's not okay. And I just felt really uncomfortable going to tell her that he was doing that because he was the son of, one of the higher ups in the company, and that guy was friends with her, and that's probably why she hired him. So it was just really like, it was something wrong that was bothering me, but I could go and tell her. But I mean, I ended up doing it, and he ended up actually getting fired, and I felt really bad. But then again, he was doing something wrong. But
Well, illegal too.
yeah, but it was just really hard and uncomfortable to go and say something because I felt like in the whole situation.
Good job, Annie, though.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, there we go. That's all. I mean, that sucks, but that's awesome.
It is hard. My husband's had some experiences where, like, people aren't treating others right, and he's gone and expressed that. And the guy, like, maybe got a little reprimand, but it still continues on, and the people up above, it's like they don't even care, And you have these other employees that just are not being treated like humans, like they're yelled and screamed at. There's unfair policies and things that are going on, and they're like, they do nothing about it. So I mean, there are situations like that, and what do you do if you've already said something?
Wow.
I worked for a
Yeah.
company. Oh, I would say I worked for a company when I was in college, and they gave you benefits with a minimum of like 30 hours a week, whatever it was, if you did it for 3 months. Once you got 2 weeks before you would get benefits, they'd cut your hours for the week to like 25 to 28, and then they tell you, no, it starts all over because you didn't work it, you don't get benefits.
Oh, that's
And
horrible.
it was a repeating problem. Their turnover was so high, it was astronomical. When I left, because I just couldn't handle it anymore, they specifically asked me to do stuff to let management know, because human resources was getting rid of any people when they were leaving. Anything that was negative, they got rid of. They shredded it or whatever. I don't know exactly what they did, but there was no negative thing about human resources in anyone's file, yet everyone was leaving because of human resources.
Wow.
No way.
It was crazy. So they asked me to go and talk to them and do stuff. It was kind of crazy.
Unbelievable.
People are
Wow.
just tin.
A lot of people sat back and just left and didn't do anything. People would just roll over and deal with it. I went and worked for another company.
Yeah. Well, I'll never forget my last job I actually worked at. My boss would actually sit and yell at us like a lot. And only like I sat in his office and cried like on multiple occasions for pretty much doing nothing wrong that was in my control at all. And like, don't get me wrong, I am not a perfect person, but he just did it because he needed to blow off steam or because the quota hadn't been met for the team, regardless of the job that I had did. And so, and I remember I went and told somebody about it, and I went and told a friend that I actually had in HR, and she's like, I would encourage you to go look for another job. She's like, file a report, and when you leave, file that report with me and let me know. Because she's like, you don't deserve to be treated that way, and it's happened by a lot of people. And it was just this very eye-opening experience of just like how people are just very hush-hush about the whole thing and just, you know, try and keep things under wraps but still handle them appropriately, you know? So, yeah.
Another thing that you can do is file with the state's Better Business Bureau. We called on something. My husband had worked for this guy for a year, and then he gave his 2-week notice. This guy was like a really jerk. I mean, like, he would curse at his employees. And anyway, so he gave his 2-week notice and quit and left. And the guy was threatening not to give his check. And so I just called the Better Business Bureau, and I think that they'd had a complaint about that guy before, but he said, well, he can't do that. He has to give you the check on the next normal paycheck period. And so he called him, and the guy came down to his new job place and gave it to him, but, you know, said a few things. So that's something that you can always do, because if they get enough complaints, then, you know, stuff can be done.
They'll be in trouble. Well, I actually just found this online on a website that talks about the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster oversight. Things up. It said, since the accident, O'Keefe has transferred Kennedy Space Center Director Roy Bridges to Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia, where the former astronaut and Air Force general will oversee the establishment of a new safety and engineering center. Bridges said last week he would seek a generous testing budget for the center, which is intended to give more clout to NASA's safety watchdogs. In the end, the board concludes that NASA can resume space shuttle operations provided a number of changes are implemented before the first orbit is rolled out to the launch pad. The major recommendations: develop an orbit inspection and repair capability, toughen the orbiter, prevent the external tank from shedding foam, train more cameras on the shuttle during liftoff, and with the help of U.S. spy satellite agencies during orbital flight, had already been publicly released before publication of the final report. This report also includes 10 new recommendations that NASA must implement before it returns to flight. So that was just a little snippet that made me feel a smidge bit better about the fact that apparently we thought maybe they didn't do anything, but it looks like they actually created a whole new department within NASA to kind of address this fact, and also implement a lot of things that had to be changed before they can even do another shuttle flight at all. So does anybody have any last thoughts or anything like that about this very sad case study?
You're asking us any last words?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I really appreciate everybody being here. You guys are really awesome, and thank you for putting up with my blue blob instead of my pink face. You guys are all awesome. So do I just hit stop broadcast then?
Yes.